add something on Ukraine? I had an experience in Ukraine in 2014. I went over to observe the elections, and this was right after the Maidan demonstrations that got rid of the last of the Russian oligarchs, and Ukraine had a chance for the first time for freedom, and they were having parliamentary elections. And as an election observer, you kind of go around and make sure the ballot boxes are sealed and see how things are going. And I was doing that, and there was a young woman who had her daughter with her, and her daughter had a Ukrainian flag. And I was just making small talk with her, and I said, do you have childcare here, or you brought your daughter? And she said, oh, no, I've got childcare, but I wanted my daughter to see. I spent my whole life either under Russian rule, Soviet rule, or under corrupt Ukrainian rule. I've spent my whole life like that, and now we're getting this as our first chance to vote, on our own in a democratic election. And I wanted my daughter, and I think the girl was 4 or 5 years old. I wanted her to see that and see what it was like to live in a free country. And that's something that impacted me. In fact, I've got a picture of this young lady and her daughter at home, and you look at that. That's what democracy means. And well, look, we can't fight everybody's war, and we can't be the policeman of the world and all those sorts of things. But we can stand up for our friends and our partners and our allies, and we can stand up for democracies around the world, as Senator Ernst talked about. Think of it, the Munich analogy is overwrought. We talk about appeasement and something, it's rolled out for sometimes for conflicts that's not really applicable. But we haven't seen something like we're seeing now in Europe since the 1930s, where you have one neighbor, because they're bigger and stronger and more powerful and has decided they want to expand territorially, just invade their neighbor and attempt to conquer them and expand their country by conquest. I mean, that used to be a legal basis for building a country. Conquest was a basis for obtaining title to land. That went out the door. We thought in World War I, and it didn't. And then we thought it went out the door in World War II. We had the UN Charter, which calls for the peaceful settlement of international disputes. And we haven't had that sort of it. We've had smaller regional countries invade their neighbors, whether it was Iraq and Kuwait or the Falklands and Argentina and the UK engagement. We haven't seen a major power attempt to conquer a neighbor since the 1930s and 1940s. We have to stop it, and we have to stop it now. And the way to stop it is for Ukraine to win. It's not for us to have some kind of negotiated settlement where Vladimir Putin takes off a big chunk of Ukraine. He's already taken a big chunk of Ukraine with Crimea in 2014. This is Sudetenland, right? We thought that Hitler would stop if we just give him Sudetenland. That'll satisfy him. If we just give him half of Poland, that'll satisfy him. If we just let him, have the Anschluss with Austria, that'll satisfy him. It never satisfies these dictators. They're not sated. They're going to come for more. And in fact, Putin at the outset of the war, gave a speech in which he mentioned the Baltics, and he mentioned Finland. I think the Finns woke up. He called the Finns part of the Russian family. And the Finns woke up and said, hey, wait a minute, we weren't part of the Soviet Union, we're not part of the Russian family. But Putin was going back to the 1800s when the Russians controlled Finland. And he made it very clear what he's going to do. And we've always said, hey, he's just ranting. Don't pay attention to it. He's not going to invade Ukraine. He's not going to invade the Baltics. He's not going to invade Finland. But we always say that about dictators. The number one person watching this war, there's one spectator who's watching it. It's our friend who went to Iowa, Xi Jinping. And I call him General Secretary Xi Jinping because that's where he derives his powers as the chairman of the party or the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China. He's watching this. And he's watching how we respond. And so I'm all for the pivot to Asia. I'm all for engaging and strengthening our alliances in Asia. We during the Trump administration, built out the Quad, which is a grouping of India and Australia and Japan and the U.S. to stand up to China and strengthen our allies and even non-allies, even partners like Vietnam that are sovereign and may not share all of our values but want to stand up to China. So we've got to do that. But we've got to help the people of Ukraine, because if Xi Jinping thinks that Putin got away with Ukraine, he's going to do the exact same thing with Taiwan. And so the way, if we get it's like enough already with the MiGs. I mean, the people are talking about a no-fly zone. We don't need an American-enforced no-fly zone in Ukraine. The Ukrainians have lots of pilots. They've got lots of airline pilots who are volunteering to fly the MiGs, to leave the Ukrainian airlines and fly the MiGs. Get the MiGs to the Ukrainians already. I mean, this is ridiculous. And they can have their own no-fly zone over their own sovereign country. I mean, it's not like we're going to fly, they want to fly over Russia. They want to fly over Ukraine and protect their citizens and their cities. That's number one. And number two, on the sanctions. We've done half-measure sanctions up until now. We haven't sanctioned Russian oil and gas. So we're talking about a $33 billion package in the Congress right now to help the Ukrainians. The Germans are going to spend $30 billion this month, $1 billion a day buying oil and gas from the Russians. Okay, and they're going to do that month in, month out. We have got to sanction the oil and gas. So for all the sanctions, and I'm happy for them, they aren't really having an effect because every dollar that the price of a barrel per oil goes up, Putin makes more money. He's making money off this invasion. He's making more revenue because of the invasion because it's driven the price of oil up. So, I mean, when's the last time you went on Amazon and said, hey, I've got to get that newest thing from Russia. I heard it's really great. Like, never, okay? Because the only thing they sell is oil and gas and minerals and some agricultural products. And all of that's been exempted. And so we've got to get serious on the sanctions, and we've got to get serious on helping the Ukrainians defend themselves. They're not asking, as Senator Ernst pointed out, they're not asking for our airmen to fly the MiGs. They'll fly the MiGs themselves. So we've got to help them defend themselves. We've got to cut the Russians off from the free world economy. And that will send a message to Xi Jinping because China cannot afford, as the senator pointed out and as the governor pointed out, they need the U.S. They need our intellectual property. Hopefully they'll pay for it. They need our farm products. They need a lot from the U.S. and from the free world. And if they see Russia cut off from the free world because of the invasion of Ukraine, they're going to think about themselves being cut off from the free world if they invade Taiwan. And China does not have a big enough domestic market to absorb all of the products it produces. If it's cut off from Europe and from Japan and from the U.S., their economy collapses, and that market economy component of their growth is gone, Governor. And so if Xi Jinping understands that's the price he'd have to pay, that will deter him. So what we're doing in Ukraine, as the senator pointed out, it has a big effect on what's going to happen in the Pacific, and that's why we have to win in the Ukraine. And the great thing is the Ukrainians have a lot of panache and spirit and boldness. We've watched it, and daring, and they'll win it for themselves. They just need us to be the arsenal of democracy and help them get there.